Now we request His Grace Satyadhana Prabhu to come speak in his glorification.
I took some notes because every year I repeat stories I didn't want to repeat, but I took the notes at 12 o'clock last night. That's when I think best. In the middle of my sleep. Maybe. We'll see. There's one story I never told, but I'm going to tell it last. Because I purposely never told it because it involves something Prabhupada said which was a little, it might be misinterpreted by devotees. But it should not be, for those who know Siddhanta. First of all, I'd like to say, of course, on Tamal Krishna Goswami's Vyasa Puja Day, it's filled with awe and reverence. But my relationship with him, we were pals. And sometimes pals talk to each other or about each other with not so much awe and reverence and get away with it. We'll see if I can today. But I will qualify that because I'll explain why. Of course, I'm not going to rehash. We all know that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was a very special devotee and figure in ISKCON. So, when I think of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I think of certain adjectives, which are, of course, he was kind, he was merciful, but some adjectives are not so complimentary. From between pals, he was so intelligent and his brain was so fertile that sometimes he was a big controller. In fact, once in Bombay, we were fighting, I'm not going to tell that whole story, but we were fighting Prabhupada's son in court, Mathura Mohan Dey, and Tamal and I were living in the same room. I didn't have white cloth in those days, but I'll not go into it. We were living in the same room, and we were at the lift. We were coming down to the lobby, and Tamal looked at me and said, "You know, Shutzi," he said, "you and I are practically the same, alike, you know?" I knew what he meant and he knew what he meant. Tough, because actually Tamal Krishna lived in Harlem and I lived 15 minutes away in the Bronx, but we didn't know each other at that time. But we knew all the same gangs, you know? The sportsmen, the Fordham Baldies, the whatever it was. And when we got together, we really had some laughs. We came from the same community, and we were tough, and we had a tendency to be controllers, and the reputation was like that. So Tamal sometimes was a big controller, and he could be manipulative. Even before disciples came into the picture of God brothers, even like me. And there's two stories in that respect. One I've told several times, but I'll tell it again. I see some new faces here. Of course, the last 6 months of Prabhupada's life, we spent together personally serving Prabhupada in Vrindavan, except for the London trip, when Prabhupada sent me he told me get Bhavananda out of jail, which I couldn't care less. I wanted to go to London, you know. I couldn't say that to Prabhupada. I believe it was Jaya Tirtha at the time, He was a big devotee at that time, a GBC. And the UK Yatra, they gifted Prabhupada a solid gold goblet. Do you know how Prabhupada would drink so sophisticated, not touching? So, Tamal Krishna always had an agenda. Whatever the issue was, he had an agenda, and he had to have some conscripts to help him fulfill the agenda. And oftentimes I was such. So he said to me, Shatadanya, this is the valuable and beautiful goblet was sent by the UK Yatra, by Jayatirtha. I'm going to bring it into Prabhupada. I want you to come with me, and whatever I say, you agree with. You say yes. Of course, Prabhupada said he wanted us to be independent thinking men. But Tamal sometimes had some different ideas. He had an agenda. However, that agenda, 100% of the time, was not selfish, but always for the benefit of Prabhupada and ISKCON. So he could dovetail this propensity for control and manipulation because of his extreme wonderful intelligence and leadership qualities, but not selfishly for his own sense gratification, and I can tell you that honestly. So I said, okay. And we went in, and we paid obeisances, and he had me produce the goblet in my hand, and he says to Prabhupada that, Srila Prabhupada, you know in Vrindavan that, and he told Prabhupada that Jayatirtha and the UK Yatra has gifted it. Prabhupada took it, looked at it, admired it. Then Tamal said that, I think we should keep it here on your desk, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada looked at him and said, and Shatadanya also thinks so. That this would be, isn't it so, Shatadanya? This would be the best place to keep this gold. I said, yes. That would be the best place. Then Prabhupada looked at both of us and he said, no. He said, it is gold. You keep it in the safe. Then Tamal said, but Prabhupada, you keep it in the safe. No one will see it. The UK Yatra who sent it will be quite upset. Just sitting in the safe. So then Prabhupada said, no. He said, if you keep it out on the desk, someone will steal it. Then Tamal said that, Srila Prabhupada, there's a devotee 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week at the door, this door of your apartment right here. For those of you who know the Vrindavan flat setup. So then Prabhupada said, yes. He said, he will steal it. Put it in the safe. And Prabhupada gave me the keys, not to Tamal, and said, lock it away. So there's another manipulation story, but that'll come at the end. Tamal Krishna was also original, you know? Prabhupada very much respected originality. And by the way, he told Prajumna, it was on a, anyway, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but anyway, he was on a flight, and one of our now sannyasis, at that time he was a new devotee, he was on the flight, and when they gave out the earphones for the movie, he didn't take it because he's a devotee, you know? We don't do that. But Prabhupada took the earphones, and it was a Charlie Chaplin movie. And this brahmachari later asked Pradumna, Pandaji, that why did Prabhupada see the movie, hear the movie? So Pradyumna later told the answer to this devotee and said that Prabhupada said that Charlie Chaplin's humor is original. It's full of originality, and Krishna is present in originality. Maybe even the Beatles, you know, they were pretty original. Yeah. So one day I was chanting with Tamal in the courtyard here in Mayapur, Japa, and he said to me, you know, Shatadanya, I was just thinking that there's no use to do something or anything if someone else has done it before. So he was always thinking how to do something wonderfully creative for Prabhupada. In Vrindavan, when we were personally serving Prabhupada, last year I said, I'll just mention it, that 3/4 of my job was Prabhupada telling me, call Tamal. Of course, on this particular occasion, he sat in that little alcove, you know, that little alcove before the door, and he was taking prasad, remnants of Prabhupada's prasadam. So then I came, I said, Tamal, Prabhupada's calling you. He said, tell him I'm taking prasad. So I went in and I said, Srila Prabhupada, Tamal said that he's taking prasad. Prabhupada said, oh, okay, no. Take. And in that little alcove, sometimes Tamal would tell me, he said, Shatadanya, wake me, I'm taking a nap, wake me up in 3 minutes. So I said, 3 minutes? You mean like 15 minutes, 12 minutes? No, 3 minutes exactly. And you better wake me up. So this was, I'm talking about originality. This was before the power nap was ever conceived. And there was a book written about it. He had already created it, the 3-minute power nap. And he was so intelligent, fertile brain, controller, a little manipulative. We understand why. Original and dynamic. Everything he does was dynamic. Do you realize that there was only one GBC for the whole subcontinent of India? And that was Tamal Krishna Goswami. One GBC. That, you know what that makes me think of? It makes me think of Yudhisthira or Maharaj Parikshit, like one emperor of the world, you know? One GBC for India. You know, he was the boss, you know? And he was a path breaker, and naturally, sometimes it would lead to controversy, especially in later years, but, you know, he had ultimate control practically, but he used it well. And in Bombay, this was a famous controversy. Everyone knows Narayan Maharaj, right? But actually, in those early days, no one knew Narayan Maharaj. Just Tamal, Jai Pataka, Bhavananda, myself, a few Mayapur devotees. No one had any interaction with Prabhupada's God brothers, but we did in those inceptive years, 1972, 1973. So we were fighting that Bombay court case against Mathura Mohan Dey, Prabhupada's son, who claimed all the BBT copyrights as his own and all the temples as his own by right of heredity. And he also claimed that Prabhupada never took sannyas. He said he was an author who went to America for name and fame. So we had to prove in the court, in the Calcutta High Court, later in the Supreme Court, and even in Bombay, that Prabhupada was a sannyasi. So we had to call Narayan Maharaj because he was the Purohit. He did the yagya. Who was the guru? Keshav Maharaj. He was a disciple of Keshav Maharaj. He was not Prabhupada's god brother. So I was sent back here to Mayapur, and I went to Navadvip, and I brought Narayan Maharaj by flight as a witness to testify as to Prabhupada's sannyas. And at that time, I told you me and Tamal was staying in the same room on the 5th floor. I remember the exact room, that inside room to the left. And Narayan Maharaj was down on a 3rd floor or 4th floor, whatever. So Tamal Krishna started going to his room every evening to hear Krishna Katha. Now that started a big controversy in ISKCON. Later, it exploded because Narayan Maharaj was not so much at that time, but he was talking gopis and so many different things. Narayan Maharaj at that time was not saying what he said a little later, that Prabhupada took you, that he didn't tell you everything because you were not ready. Now I can give you the higher thing and all that jazz. So he didn't say that overtly, but he was still talking Gopi Bhav and all that. And Tamal was going. And Tamal never invited me. And there were other, I'm not going to name them, but right now there are several big gurus. They were amongst his enlistees in this matter. It's on? Yeah. He told me, why don't you come? So I went once, and I heard it, and I never went again. But they were going every evening. Later, they got in trouble. Several big names, which I'm not going to name, unless you pay me. And later, that whole of course, Narayan Maharaj became a big thing, and he was initiating Prabhupada's sannyasis, and I'm not going to go through the whole shlamazel. But I was, again, chanting with Tamal in the courtyard. And he said, you know, Satyadhana, that whole Narayan thing, at least you should know. He said, I never took my eye off the ball, which meant Prabhupada. Never. I never was confused. I never bought all that higher. He said, we're Prabhupada men. We're Prabhupada men. And he said, the others, which I'm not naming, he said, got bewildered. So maybe that's my fault. I brought them in. They got bewildered about his Siddha Pranali, Gopi Bhav, all that talks. He said, not me. He said, I just like to hear. We're fighting the case every day in the Bombay High Court, getting bit by bed bugs in the benches, and I just wanted to hear. And I said, you know, Tamal, I actually believe you. And I do. But some others, they got bewildered or confused. Now, so, originality, dynamism, super intelligence, Emperor of India, but a controller and manipulative, none the same. Now I'm going to tell that last story, which I never told, because some I won't say neophyte, but some devotees may confuse it. But anyway, I'll tell it. In Vrindavan, while we were serving Prabhupada those last months, there were quite a few unmarried single lady devotees. And they were sort of piling in. And Tamal didn't like the whole scene because whenever he would go into the reception room, so many young girls were there. Hare Krishna. They were chanting and not doing anything wrong. But Tamal, this was a opportunity for Tamal Krishna Goswami agenda. And he needed his conscript, me. So he said, he started complaining for about a week to me. All these young girls, this is not what Vrindavan is supposed to be, and this and that. Then one day he comes to me and he says, let us bring it to Srila Prabhupada. It was a complaint. So I said, okay. And then I told Tamal a story before we saw Prabhupada, a few days before, that, of course, most of the time I lived in a little room in Prabhupada's house with Upendra. We just slept on a mat. But sometimes I lived in the room in the guest house on the ground floor at the end with Tamal and Bhavananda, who were the secretaries. So that room, you know, the walls were not very thick, and the bathrooms were opposite each other. So I was taking a shower, and as I said, I was in saffron, not in the shower, but I was in the shower, and from the room next door, I heard a very young girl's voice singing, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So I told the story to Tamal. So when we went in to see Prabhupada, then Tamal started complaining. He said, Srila Prabhupada, this is Vrindavan, and there's so many young unmarried girls, and they're all in the reception room, and, you know, they're all over the place. So Prabhupada said, no. He said, actually, Vrindavan is meant for retirement. Only those who are retired should reside here. In other words, he was acquiescing with Tamal that this is not the place for young unmarried women. And, no, wait, I forgot something. Yeah. He said, this should only be for retired. And what I'm thinking in my mind, that meant some old bats dressed in white, right? You know old bats, right? That's an Americanism. Now we're at the age where we are old male bats, yeah. So then Prabhupada said, no, this is not the place for them, young girls. And then he spoke a generalism, not unmarried girls, but he was talking about even devotees. He said, if they want to have sex, let them go to Mayapur. So me and Tamal, we covered that up for many years. But that didn't mean illicit sex, of course. And we all know the story in Chaitanya Charitamrita of Junior Haridas, how strict Prabhupada was. But that was the prognosis of what Vrindavan is supposed to be for those who are retired. So that story we together covered up for many years. He never put it in the book, and I never told it, but we all understand what it means. Lord Chaitanya is more liberal than even Krishna. Sarvadhamam Prityaja. But Lord Chaitanya, that mercy, special mercy is here in Vrindavan, in Mayapur. So that's the end. I'll tell one more story, which he always likes. It's in my estimation, it's hackneyed because I've told it so many times. But I love it because it's completely Tamal Krishna Goswami in your face. We would, after I got married, Tamal would eat, whenever he was here, he'd come to my house and eat, whether we invited him or not. And my wife and Ganga's wife, who are South Indian sisters, they're very good cooks. Not just South Indian cooks, but Italian. And so, in fact, I always wore a white kurta in those days. And Tamal said, "You never, ever eat pizza or any Italian without me. I'll come to know. I'll come to know because..." And subsequently, if there was any red mark on my white kurta, tomato sauce, he would catch me at it. Said, "You ate spaghetti without me," because of that red mark. Anyway, on this particular day, we were having pizza. We were already up in the Hula Guide house, and seriously and gravely looked at her when she was bringing out the cake, and he said, "Is that chocolate?" And Rashashwari, Ganga's wife, became very fearful, you know. She was actually physically shaking with the cake. And she said, "Yes, Maharaj, it's a chocolate fudge." And then Tamal Krishna looked at her and said, "Thank God," he said, "never ever give me any of that carob crap." Tamal Krishna Goswami ki jai.